Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be looking at the Vue Composition API. The Vue Composition API is going to be a major part of the Vue 3.0 library. And what it does is it's going to replace the options API that we currently use in Vue.js. So instead of saying data, methods, computed, etc. on the Vue object, we are going to use something called setup. And inside the setup, we're going to use stuff called reactive and ref and onMount. So stay tuned to learn all about this new API and why it could be useful. And remember, if you liked the video, don't forget to give a thumbs up or subscribe or just comment something down below. Let me know what you think. Before we get started, I just wanted to show you where you could download Node.js in case you don't know, because to follow along with this tutorial, you will need Node.js installed on your computer. Simply navigate in your search bar in your browser to nodejs.org. And on there, you'll see download links. And I recommend downloading the 10.16.3 long-term support version. I already installed it. You'll just follow the steps and get it done. But I'm pretty sure most of you should have it installed. And to check if you do, you could go to your terminal or command line by running in your search bar, just type in cmd, or in my case, I downloaded the Windows terminal. And in there, you can do node-v. And this should show you your version. I have version 12.2.0 installed right now, and I have npm-v, which is also important, 6.9.0. So to get started, we need to use the Vue CLI to install our base Vue app. The Vue CLI has nothing to do with the Composition API. It's just a tool to help us scaffold a Vue project. And to get started quickly, if you don't have Vue installed globally on your machine, you could either do npm install -g add Vue /CLI, and this will install Vue globally on your system. If you don't want to install Vue globally on your system, you can do npx, which comes with the latest version of, or even the long-term support version of Node. You can do npx and then add Vue /CLI, and then create, and then the project name. But I have it installed on my system, so I'm just going to do Vue, which is basically what the command that we'll have after we install the CLI. So we'll say Vue create, and then the project name, which I'll call Vue Composition API. So once we run that command, we'll have to select some options. For this project, let's keep it simple. We'll remove the linter and we'll just keep Babel, and then press enter, and we'll put our config files in the package.json, and then we won't save this for future use. And this will install our dependencies for us. Now that we have the Vue app installed, we need to install one dependency, and that is going to be the Composition API dependency. And the way we do that is through npm, or I'm going to use yarn add, and then at Vue /composition -API. And this is an important dependency for us to be able to use this API. Now that we have the Composition API installed, we can cd into our app, which we called Vue Composition API, and then open it with our code editor. I have VS Code installed, but you can install it with whatever code editor you want. My theme is Cobalt 2 by WesBoss, in case anybody wondered. So this is just our basic Vue application. We have a source, a public, and our public is where all our static files will be, and our source is where we write our code. We can create components and views and stuff like that. The first file that we want to open up is our main.js, because that's where we'll import this Composition API plugin. Because for now, it's just a normal Vue plugin, but when Vue 3 ships, it should be part of the core library. So let's open up our source directory and then main.js. And then in here, we can simply say, because we have this dependency installed, we can say import Vue Composition API from the at Vue Composition API. And then to use it, we have to say vue.use the Composition API that we just imported. and save that. So this should make the setup function available, and by setup function you'll see what I mean in a minute. Let's have a look at what our app currently looks at by opening up our terminal and then running yarn serve or npm run serve. The default port of the yarn serve command is 8080. So if we go to our browser and then go to port 8080 on localhost, we should see our application. And this is the basic Vue application. So now what we want to do is start looking at the Composition API that we installed. What we can do is we go to source and then app.vue and then just delete all of this stuff. We can just delete everything and then say Vue, which is a shortcut if you have Vue installed, which is this extension, Vitur or not sure. And then what you can do is just type in Vue and then it should suggest a full template like that, and then save that. So now we have an empty template and our app should be broken. There's nothing there. Let's open up a console just in case there are any logs that we're missing, and then minimize that again. So first thing is first, what do we currently do in Vue.js? So there's a lot of things that we can do with Vue.js, like data binding, event listeners, methods, data, computed, all these crazy things. And basically what this does is there's state in your application, which is a type of data. So there's you could put like a name string or a number, which could be age or object or something like that. And then in your template, you can reference that and render it out on the client. So as an example, let's do h1. And then in here, we have to put these curly braces to say message. And if you know Vue.js, that's okay. We try to cater for everyone here, that even the new people. So we can do data, which is the old way of doing it. So data could be a function, or it could be a property, which is a function that returns an object. And then the object would be the data property. So we can do message and then hello world. And this should render in our h1 tag hello world, because this is referencing this message over here. Let's save that and go to our browser and you'll see hello world. It looks a little bit ugly, but that's just how we display it. So computed properties are similar, but they usually are based off of data properties. So they're an object and each computed property has its own function. So we'll call this one changed message. And then we'll return the message dot replace, which is a function, a string method. And then what we want to replace is the hello with the word hi. So instead of hello, we're going to say hi. And then below the h1, we can print another h1 with the changed message. And in Vue, we can't have two elements right underneath the template, so we have to do a containing template, containing tag. Anyone will work, div, main, anything, section, and then paste that. And we have to add a this dot to the message. To reference anything within our object, we have to say this dot. And that is also one of the things that we do away with the Composition API. So this dot will reference this message. So this dot message is equal to the message. So now we're returning that message, but instead of hello, we're saying hi. Let's see if we reload this now. So now we can see hello world and hi world. And that's computed properties. This is just a quick rundown of the old way, then we'll introduce the Composition API. So with another thing that we could do is we could add methods. So methods is a property on the options that we define functions in, or methods, and we can say change message. Oh, we already have a change. Yeah, we could call it change message, because we have changed message, but we can leave out the D and just make a change, which is a verb. And then what we want to do is just say this dot message equals this dot message dot replace hello with by. So what this will do is it will replace our hello property, our hello string directly on the data property. So what we could do is just save that, and now we have to add something to call this. So we can say button, and then the button will need a click listener, and that's how we define click listeners, with an @ or another way to do it is with a v-on, but I like the @ and then inside the quotes we can just call that changed message, and we don't have to say this dot changed message because the template knows what we're referring to. And then we can just add a text in here that says change. So what's going to happen when we click this change message button over here? It's going to call this, and it's going to change our data property from hello world to by world, and our changed message will also be affected, but it won't see this hello on there anymore. It'll see by, so it won't really do anything. That hi just won't be there. So what we can do is go to our browser, reload this, and we still have hello and hi, and then when we change, both should be by, because this computed is relying on the fact that there's a hello over there which isn't there anymore. So that is the basics of reactivity. And one more thing I wanted to show you, which is quite important. This is not a Vue tutorial. This is just a rundown of how we do things now. We could have an input, and then on there we could add a V model tag, and then just say message. And then when we go back to our browser, we can see that whatever is in the message we have over here now. So now we can directly change our message through the input because it is two-way binded, and that's very, very useful for application development. Okay, so this is the basics, and there's a few other things like the created property or option, which runs as soon as our component is created, and then there's mounted, and there's before mount, and all these lifecycle hooks that you can find on the Vue instance. And there's a reason I'm showing you this, because it's important for the Composition API that we're going to have a look at right now. Okay, so I quickly built out a simple little app, and what else than a to-do app. So what this does is it has an input, and below the input it has a unordered list that is looping through items in this to-dos object, which is on our data property. And then we call each item that we loop over an item, and then we look at it at its index as well for the key, because that is a necessary property when we do a loop like that. And then we add a click listener to the button that says add item, and then we make sure that we are modeling the item in our data. So when we click add item, then we push or unshift this array, which means add it to the front, where push would be adding to the back, just so the list goes in order. And then we reset item to empty. So let's have a look at the functionality. It's very ugly, but let's just have a look at it. So let's say clean house, and then add item. It should add to the list and clear out that. And then we could say make this pretty, and then add item, and then it adds to the top of the list because we unshifted. So this is how we would do this with the normal options API. So how would we do this with the Composition API? Well, first of all, we can completely remove the data and the methods. And before getting started, for now, we have to say import the in destructured syntax. We have to import the reactive, we have to import the ref, and we have to import that from the @Vue Composition API library that we installed. And instead of saying data and all those things, what we could say is just setup. One setup function for everything. And there's a reason why this is very useful, and we'll talk about that soon. So what do we do in setup? Well, first of all, we need a way to bind to item. And we could say that item is let item equals a string, but that won't work, because how would Vue know that this thing is reactive? So let's say we try to edit this item, from our user interface. Vue needs a way to know that this property is changing, this specific variable is changing. So we have to wrap this in Vue's reactive, and then reactive can get a object, and then we can call this, let's call this thing state, and then we can say item in here, and then the item would be empty. So instead of item up here, we'll have to say state.item, and then we need to-dos as well, which will be an empty array, and we can do state.to-dos. So what's with the state thing? Isn't this a little bit more to say? Well, it is kind of, but it's a good trade-off, I would say. Every component can have its own state variable because this isn't exposed on any of the instance. But if you don't want to say state, there is another way of doing it, and that's with ref. So ref would look something like this. We could mark this out, and then we could say that let the item equals ref, and then in ref the string, and then we could say let to-dos equals ref, and then in ref there would be a empty array. But now to use this, we'll, instead of having to say state dot, we have to say item dot value and to-dos dot value. So we don't reference the name directly anymore, but it's not too much of a bad syntax, and it actually helps with having to separate logic in our application, which is a big goal with the Vue 3 API. So what we want to say here is state, and I'm going to use reactive for this tutorial, but that was just to show you how ref works. And then we'll do state.item up here. So back to the code down here. What does this do? So if we save this, this still would break because the setup function only declares this variable, but we don't know about it in our application. So if we go to this, we can see property or method is not defined on the instance, but referenced during the render. So what we need to do here in setup is return our object that has state on it. And what this single property is doing is just saying state. It's just a shorthand for doing that. So we're referencing this state. And then if we go back, you'll see that our app is working again. If we reload, it's only saying that we don't know about that add item method. So how do we add methods? And that's the cool thing. Methods are simply functions with the new API. So we could just say function add item, and then we could say the same thing that we did in the method. We can say this dot to-dos dot unshift. But see, I already made a mistake because I'm so used to the current Vue API. We don't use this anymore. We use state.todos because there is no this. And that's a cool thing because now we can separate our functions. Like this method could be huge. This could be a very big part of this component, hundreds of lines of code. So what we could do is we could completely take this out and put it in a separate JavaScript file and just import it to make our component more readable. To-dos is just unshifted with the item. So basically when we unshift, we put it at the beginning. And then we want to clear it out again. So we can say state.item equals nothing and save that. And for our application to know about this method, we need to add it to our return. So we can do add item and save that. So now we have a way of adding to-dos through add item. We have item and we're modeling it and we're returning it. So let's see if anything is broken. Test add item. Be on a reference item is not defined. Instead of saying item, we have to say state.item and then save that. And then we can try clean house, add item, it should be there, remove paint, add item, it should be there, and our thing clears out. And that's exactly the same functionality that we had. The next important thing about this is what's the use? It seems like more syntax and a little bit more confusing. Well, yeah, but the thing is, now our code is more readable, it's more distributable. We can move this function and reuse it many times, and it's also very grouped in a way that if this was methods and data and stuff like that, this whole thing, then we are forced to be structured according to the options. Our structure of our app is data, methods, computed, etc. So if a app or component has many different functionalities, the problem is that those functionalities are split into different areas. And when our setup is like this, that means we can split our code into very useful little modules. So what we're going to do now is extract our to-do item logic or concern into its own little functionality. So instead of saying all of this in setup, we'll have the same problem if this module had many different things. So let's say authentication, checking users, doing this, doing that, making sure an item is linked to something. So we want to group this logic into different sections. So the way we can do this is we don't even have to be in our export default. We can say function use to do app, and then this use to do app will basically contain all of our logic. And then paste that in there and just remove the bracket. So now our entire app logic is put into its own little function, which could even be exported in or imported from a file. So what we can do is just minimize this function, and then in setup we could say const state and add item equals use to do app. And this syntax is basically saying, let's destructure the state and the add item from the returned object from function use to do app. And we return state and add item. The state is reactive, so when we change it on here, then it should affect the to do app. So let's save that. Let's minimize this just to act like it's an external thing that's been imported. And now our entire setup function just has one line of code that has one area of concern. So let's go to our browser, reload, not defined on the instance. Oh, because in setup we have to return our state and add item too. And then reload. It should be good. Let's test and add item. Item is not defined in v on handler. Item is not defined. Let's see where this error is coming from, because we have to say state.item and save that. Go back, test, and there we have it. Our items are adding and deleting as they should. So my camera decided to cut out, and just before I finish off, I just wanted to show you guys a few other things like computed, unmounted, and in the setup function, props and context. So let me just run this app again. So the old way of the Vue options API, you would access computed and mounted inside the options. But with the new API, we don't have access to that. So to be able to access that, we have to say import it from the Vue Composition API. And what we're going to do to access the props is give the setup function an argument of props. And this context will log out to show you what it does or what it is. Save that, and then we'll just create a computed property. So we'll just say const my data equals computed, which we imported, and then this takes a callback. And then usually we would do something like state.item or state.items .todos at 0. So we just want to get the first item from our state.todos. And for the on mounted, we can just log something out as our app starts, which is also a callback function. So this is just a quick way of showing you how to use these things in case you wanted to see that. And props we usually only use in components. So when you have a component, the component would usually receive a prop like this, something like that, or sometimes it would have something like name, and then the type would be string or something like that to validate the prop. But that's how you would access it in the setup function, is by saying props, and then you can just say props.name. I won't showcase that right now because we don't have a component, but the my data we can just print out below this button. So there's no to-dos now. We'll have to create one, but let's just do this, and we can access that the same way we access our other properties, just through my data, and then we can go to the browser. And then before going to the browser, remember that you have to return my data out of the setup function from export default. So when we go to the browser and inspect, we should see no errors, and the object is our attributes emit listener, and this is the context that we are logging from our app. And then when we add something, we should see the latest add item at the bottom, because our computed function is returning the first one, and remember we're pushing in items at the beginning. So that's just a quick rundown of these different things, and there's more you can do before on create, or on before create mount, and on before update, and those things, which are all lifecycle events. And that is basically what we can expect from Vue 3. If you guys like the video, remember to leave a like or subscribe. And thank you for watching this. I hope you guys found something useful or are excited about Vue 3. And I'll catch you next time. Cheers.